Authority, welcome to Facebook Live as we look ahead to the midterm elections here in Massachusetts and across the country. As always, as we were in September, joined by political consultant Paul Robbins. Paul, voting is closed. The polls closed at 8 o'clock tonight. We're talking probably a low turnout in this thing, but as we discussed on the Sunday program last week, as you look ahead to the races around here, do you see, as far as the favorites are concerned, any kind of an upset around here?
I don't, but 2 hours from now, I could say, hey, I was wrong. Because there's always one that kind of pops up. And look at the primary, right? Shirley Arriaga. Probably low name recognition, first time running for a state representative, running against somebody that was well known, that was on the council in Chicopee, and she blew his doors out. So you never say never. I'd be really surprised if there was any changes.
As we look, in comparison to 2020, the presidential year, yes, where there was a high voter turnout, the consensus usually is in Massachusetts that, hey, in an off year where there's a governor's race, the turnout is going to be lower. And in particular with the governor's race in this state, I was reading the Globe this morning, basically they were saying it was one of the most boring gubernatorial contests in recent memory.
It comes down to not only the fact that the state is Democratic, but there's so much money now parked in these Democratic candidacies. So Maura Healey had a huge advantage. Typically, when there's an open seat, it raises interest from the public and from voters, and there's a higher turnout. She's been, the minute he decided he wasn't going to run, basically the whole state ceded the corner office to her. So there's nothing to get people riled up and out. That could play a little bit in some of the legislative races. It's possible, but I don't see it.
I mean, interesting, too, that I was reading something the other day that since 1958, 6 former attorney generals have sought the governor's office. All have failed up until, we believe, tonight. And,
wow.
And history will be made tonight. I mean, you think Frank Bellotti, Elliot Richardson didn't, but the number of people who did run and failed.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to the times, the fact you have to raise money. She's a woman, and female candidates are doing extremely well across the board. And you look at both parties. They're putting a lot of women into races now because I think that has been the other way for so long. And she's a good candidate. She raised a lot of money. She did a good job as far as most people are concerned as Attorney General. So, yeah, it's not usually a stepping stone. It's something like Lieutenant Governor usually is, but we're breaking the mold here.
And interesting here, too, there are a couple of races, the John Vilas-Cecilia Calabrese race. 2 good candidates. Very well-known Cecilia Calabrese in Agawam and John Vilas through the district. A good race, and possibly in another year, you might see a different outcome. But Vilas is a strong candidate.
Yeah, he's a strong candidate. He's a veteran. He's been what we would call a conservative Democrat because he kind of lives in that, conservative Democrat constituency, Westfield. But he does have a geographic base. He is an incumbent, with a geographic base that also includes Holyoke that he's run in and won a number of times. So, but she's run a representative campaign and been very, vociferous in her campaign. You never know, but I'd be surprised if that one went the other way.
Tough for a Republican in this state, isn't it?
Yeah, it is tough. And they're the ones that are always cutting up the districts always. So you're seeing it in Florida.
Yeah.
There's going to be at least 2 pickups in Florida nationally because DeSantis and the Republican legislature cut it up so yeah, there's a huge advantage to being the Democratic Party, obviously, in Massachusetts.
I think this is going way, way back, and you remember these times, but I think one of the first election years I was really interested in was 1960. Of course, you had John Kennedy running it. He was here election eve. And, I can remember my dad, who was a staunch Republican at the time, taking me to a Republican rally at Symphony Hall. And Henry Cabot Lodge was running for vice president with Nixon. But you had John Volpe. You had, I forget who was lieutenant governor. Elliot Richardson was his lieutenant governor. You had Ed Brooke for attorney general. That all the constitutional offices, I think, except for Secretary of State, maybe treasurer because it was Bob Crane, were all held by Republicans.
Yeah.
How times have changed.
So that led us to Weld and Baker and Cellucci because the Republican Party of Massachusetts was a different animal. So it's funny because it was fiscally always conservative. The social issues have gotten into the way of the Republican Party now, so that there's a Republican Party of Massachusetts and there's Republicans every place else. I remember those days as well.
Yeah.
John Volpe and And the other thing I remember is Tom O'Connor, who was the mayor of Springfield back then,
yeah.
ran against Saltonstall for Senate, lost, and at the time was the first losing candidate to achieve 1 million votes in losing a statewide race like that.
Back then.
Back then.
All right. We're going to break away from here. Paul, when we come back at the 8:30 hour, we're going to talk about, we're going to look at the national picture and the possibility of the House going back to Republican control and what that could mean to the congressional delegation here in Massachusetts. And we can also tell you that at 8:06, Maura Healey has been declared the winner of the gubernatorial race in Massachusetts.
Take long.
No surprise there.
No surprise there.
All right.
Maybe it should have been 8:05. I don't know.
8:05. All right. Paul, thanks to you for watching on Facebook. Of course, you can always go to westernmassnews.com or the Western Mass News app for the latest results as they start to come in. We'll see you in about 25 minutes.